My name's Katie Ryan. I'm the Career Community Advisor for Education, Nonprofit, and Social Impact, and I'm thrilled to have all of you in the room tonight. I just want to start with some thank yous to the students for taking time out of your busy schedules. I heard midterms have started already, so thank you for being here. To the alumni and employers who have joined us for the networking session, we're so thankful to have you. To Joy for facilitating this tonight, to my career education team. Almost all of you are here and pitched in, and particularly Destiny was my partner in crime with this, so special thanks to you. So, when Destiny and I originally conceptualized this event, we wanted to create a format that facilitated meaningful conversation between students, alumni, and employers who all share a commitment to pursuing work that makes a positive, generative social impact. With the panel, we hope to celebrate the diversity of careers that exist in these fields and unpack current and emerging trends that will help students better understand where these fields are heading and how they can fit into this evolving landscape. Equally important, we hope that this dialogue will provide all of us with a common language with which we can begin to grapple with questions such as, how can we best explore and grow within these spaces? What are the values, priorities, and goals that drive us to pursue these fields? And how can we build community and connections with those who are similarly oriented towards making a social impact? We imagine the panel discussion will serve as a foundation for subsequent conversations during the networking portion of the evening, offering themes and inspiration that all of us can take up as we talk with one another. And so therefore, we invite employers and alumni to use the networking portion of the event to share their own career journeys, the values that led them to pursue this work, and how their organization is making an impact in their own local communities. And similarly, we encourage students to share why they are drawn to these career fields and what they hope to learn and gain before they take the next steps into these spaces. So in other words, we see this event as a launch point for new relationships, for new connections, conversations between all of us who have taken this time out of our busy schedules to come together over our shared commitment to creative, meaningful, community-focused work. So to start this evening, I want to introduce Joy St. John, our facilitator. She is Wellesley's Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, and she is a leader in college admissions and higher education, having spent the last 20 years dedicated to issues of access and diversity. Prior to joining Wellesley, Joy served as an Associate Dean of Admissions at Amherst, held admissions roles at Tufts and Occidental, as well as a college counseling role at the Bishop School in La Jolla. She earned her bachelor's from Stanford and a JD from UCLA School of Law. And we're so honored to have Joy tonight to guide our conversation with our panelists, because her career path really beautifully demonstrates so many of our themes tonight, namely that there's no single pathway into these fields, and that a commitment to making a positive social impact can be a powerful driver of one's career journey. So please welcome me, and please join me in welcoming Joy.
Thank you so much. I think this is just a wonderful opportunity to be on the stage with 5 other very impressive leaders in our field of culture, nonprofit type of work. And I think this is a great opportunity for students. As you heard from my introduction, I have a JD from UCLA School of Law, mostly because my father insisted that I go to graduate school, even though he had not graduated from college. And he said to me, you liked Perry Mason. You always liked, watching law shows. You should go to law school. And I was like, okay, because the LSAT had less math than the GRE. So and then I ended up falling into a very mission-driven profession, which has really fed me in ways that I could never have anticipated. So I think it's a great opportunity for students to start thinking about roles in these fields, because you don't tend to sort of grow up thinking, like watching shows about working in our fields. And so no one suggests our professions to young people who are thinking about their futures. And so this is a really great opportunity to learn and understand more about the work that we do and how it's changing. So I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's comments. So I thought a great way to start would be just to ask each of you, and I'll pass the mic, to briefly introduce yourselves and share a bit about your organization. and your role within that organization, and then also just to situate your organization or your field within the broader nonprofit culture education landscape.
Thank you. My name is Megan Bird. I'm a graduate of Wellesley 2003. I spent 11 years working at Citizen Schools, which is a nonprofit headquartered in Boston. I started out there as an AmeriCorps member, and 9 years later ended up promoted to be the executive director. So I had quite a pathway within that organization. And then I left my role there last August when I moved to New Hampshire. And now I am a senior consultant in a social enterprise called Positively Partners. I do HR and talent recruitment consulting.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Mason. I'm the founder and CEO of the Social Impact Studio. We're a small consulting firm. We work with nonprofits, foundations, and the public sector to help them reimagine their programs and services for greater impact. My background is in child, family, and community development. I've worked in that field for a number of years and made the transition to take on the lens of a designer to really think about how do we shift paradigms and how do we shift the way we think about the programs and services that we offer folks to be more human-centered and really grounded in their lives and their communities, right? The real needs of people that we aim to serve. How do we partner with them to co-design? And that's what our studio is all about. So my career has been focused on equity and thinking about how we bring the voices of those who don't typically have a role at the table into the process of designing services that are going to ultimately, hopefully, benefit them.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Shao. I am a senior business development analyst at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So for those of you who might not know, Dana-Farber is a comprehensive cancer center. We do 50% research and 50% clinical care, which allows us to do both more effectively and create change and hopefully create more cures effectively as well. So I'm actually here representing the Division of Philanthropy. That's a division that I started in when I first joined. I started as an assistant, and it's quite a large division, about 275 people, raised over $280 million last year. And for context, that's second among all cancer organizations in the US. So I'm very passionate about the foundation that gave me. It really allowed me to learn a lot about the working world and professional norms, and as well as the opportunity to grow in a lot of different ways. So would love to talk more about that, which I will, I'm sure.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Jones-Davis, class of 98 from Wellesley. I'm the executive director, the founding executive director of a small national nonprofit called Nation of Makers. We're only a few years old, so we're sort of representing the startup world. We can be best described as sort of an association for America's maker organizations. So how many people know what the maker movement is really quickly, because it'll change? Okay, only a few people. So the maker movement is really sort of hands-on creativity, building with your hands, experiencing through hands-on experiential learning. And so we support organizations that do that type of work. We do that in 3 different ways: community building, resource sharing, and advocacy. And we really just aim to support the growth of those organizations, the continued sustainability of those organizations, and how they can have an impact on the world around them. And my work is really, really gratifying to me, because I started out as a neuroscientist. And as much as I love neuroscience, I found myself in the evenings working on maker stuff, doing it so much that my husband turned to me one day and said, "Why don't you put that as the thing that you do?" And that's how I transformed there. And I will talk more about that a little bit later.
Hi, I'm Anita Walker, Executive Director of the Mass Cultural Council. We are a state agency, and a lot of people think of a state agency as a funder, and we are a funder. We fund 400 cultural nonprofits in the arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences in every corner of the Commonwealth, 329 local cultural councils, the most comprehensive grassroots volunteer infrastructure of arts and culture anywhere in the nation. You should be so happy to be in Massachusetts, because we have here. It honestly is the best place. We also support 70 creative youth development programs, Creative Youth Development was born and raised here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And these are programs that work with vulnerable teenagers primarily, young adolescents who are having difficulty transitioning from adolescence to adulthood. They're not really focused on making better painters or dancers or actors. The test in these programs is when young people, through their own agency, come through the programs, we ask at the end, how do you answer the question, do I matter and can I make a difference in my community? And we actually fund the youth in the programs so they can make a difference in their community. We also are really embarking on an agenda around accessibility. In fact, this morning I was at an event to celebrate the 160 organizations in Massachusetts who raised their hand a year and a half ago and agreed with us that they would accept the EBT card, which is the food stamp card, maybe the common vernacular. In this time, more than 250,000 admissions by way of the EBT card have taken place in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And these are people who are struggling every day to put food on the table and to pay their rent. And the EBT card gave them an opportunity, as one woman wrote me and said, this was a slice of my life where I felt normal for 1 hour and a half at the theater. We believe in the power of culture, so whether you're interested in community developments, we have 46 state-designated cultural districts, so we're involved in community development and community revitalization. We're involved in creative minds so that the next generation of young people are prepared for the creative economy. We're involved. Actually, I heard a couple of medical notes here. We are very interested in moving into the area of social prescribing. We're over-medicating people today, and we already have evidence out of England, out of Canada, that prescribing the arts is a really nice intervention that can take place before we get into invasive medical techniques, and it's also a great prevention when it comes to especially epidemic of isolation and loneliness. So lots going on in the arts and culture field, and I hope you'll think about that.
Okay, I want to take us towards a more personal focus first, and just to help frame for people why people choose to do the work that we do. And so just to ask some of you to talk about how you came to understand your own kind of personal and cultural values that motivated your work or to pursue the work that you're pursuing.
So for me, I think you know what type of person you are, and I say that, and you might be like, what are you talking about? Even when I was at Wellesley, I was a connector, and so some of you may have read Malcolm Gladwell's books and understand what that means. It's like I get pleasure from connecting people. So if you need help and you have help, I like putting you together. And so I knew that from an early age, and when I talked to my family, they sort of saw that in me too, that like I was the helper. I've always been the helper in life. And so, even within my lab when I was doing research, I was always trying to fix other people's problems. And so once I identified that characteristic about myself, I started thinking about, okay, what are some jobs that might fit in with that? And I found myself, what you volunteer for says a lot about you, right? What you'll do in your spare time when no one's paying you, when no one's looking, says a lot about you. And I looked back, and if I look back on all the things that I've done, all the types of helping that I've done, they all have led me to the place where I'm at. And so I think that, my values really were set at a really young age. I've always wanted to help other people, and I always knew that I'd probably find myself being happiest at a job where I was able to help people. I do think that I, also had values that aligned with, science, technology, engineering, and math, so STEM fields, STEAM as well. I came from an artistic background. I played violin, even here at Wellesley, and my dad was a musician, so I came from, I had cultural arts as well. And so when I look at where I landed, I kind of landed at this confluence of a place where I'm able to support people that are in the arts, that are creatives, that are doing work that is meaningful to me, that are in STEM, that are making a difference in their communities, and I get to connect them with people that can make their vision happen. So in reality, like, I say to people all the time, I found my dream job, and I kind of created it for myself. And if you had told me that I'd end up here, I'd be like, absolutely not. And I also had the dad that was like, you're going to go to graduate school, and you're going to do this. And I was like, sure, of course I will. And there were some reasons why I had to at that moment. But I think, really listening to yourself and your own moral compass and what you're drawn to naturally will help you identify what you should be doing, what you were placed here to do.
So this is a really interesting question because I don't think we stop and think about the origin of passion or the origin of commitment, particularly in this field. I think many of us work day in, day out, feeling like we're doing the best work we can, constantly trying to have a greater impact. And we don't have the luxury of stepping back, or we don't take the luxury of stepping back and saying, well, how did I start? So when you asked the question, I sort of reflected, I'm like a little bit embarrassed to say, for maybe the first time, on sort of where did this actually come from? So I think as a child, I was always really meticulously obsessed with fairness, right? Which as a child, I understood first with my relationship with my brother, right? So nothing was ever fair. There were two of us, and like one of us rode more times in the front seat than the other, right? Or all of the things that children fight about. And I was really attuned to this notion of fairness. And I think as I went through schooling and as I went through university and as I had jobs, I started to think about what did fairness mean in the context of a broader system, in the world that we live in, and how did that play out? And I became increasingly aware of the privilege that I held in a number of different environments. So I grew up in Australia, right? And I held a certain privilege there. I moved to the US, knowing nothing really about racial relations in the US, nothing about sort of US history, and came to an awareness or sort of came of age and learned about these issues as an 18 to 22-year-old, not as the 8 to 10-year-old or whatever it is that many people who grow up in this country. So I had an older brain, right? I had more experience and more education at the point at which I was reflecting on the US as a society, right? It was really meaningfully reflecting. And I came to understand fairness as being about equity. And I had this deep-seated sense that something wasn't right. And through a number of different experiences, through my education, but primarily through work and volunteer experiences, to your earlier point, I came to see that injustice is designed. And when you realize injustice is designed, you realize that you can redesign and you can undesign, and that we need to actually turn around and design for justice. So I think this sort of kernel of fairness between siblings, fairness within a family unit, started to grow into something much bigger as I came to really think about and contemplate systems in the larger world we live in and understand fairness in a much more complex and nuanced way. And that was a driving force for me. And it just made me realize that I wanted to reflect on my own position and think about the way in which I could work towards a more equitable society and I could be a part of redesigning justice within our own society.
I just have to say this. I just finished watching 36 episodes of Perry Mason.
See, they're too young to even know. I realized when I said Perry Mason, they're like, what are you talking about?
I love that show. It's like a puzzle every night. We get
It's like law. It was before Law and Order. It was like you would sit there and watch a ridiculous number of Perry Mason's courtroom dramas over and over and over again.
But it's fun to look at the old cars and see what the 50s looked like. And actually, to that point, both of what you just commented on, sparked some thoughts in my mind as I was a little bit stuck on that question. But when I think about where I am today, by the way, I have the best job on the planet. I honestly get to dabble in what everybody else is doing, and I'm amazed, I am absolutely amazed when I look at our field here in Massachusetts. Organizations that are all volunteer run, all the way to the MFA and the BSO and the Clark that are like world-class, well-endowed organizations, yet what every single one of them does and how they lead with their heart and passion amazes me. It amazes me that I've been here 12 years, and funding 400 organizations going through 2 recessions, fewer than 5 of our cultural nonprofits have gone out of business in the last 12 years. So, and that's been the mystery to me, like, why is this? How is this possible? And it's because they're passion driven. They're organizations that are doing something that matters to their community. For me, where I got to this job, which I didn't even know existed when I was your age and in college and trying to figure out what to do, I got here just like on a rather circuitous journey and path. And I hope that's what everybody else gets to do as well. Gets to try a lot of things and exercise a lot of different parts of yourself. I found out along the way over the last many, many years that I'm part engineer, I'm part marketer, I'm part cultural advocate, I'm part lead with the heart social justice leader, and what's great about the job I have is I get to put all those puzzle pieces together and exercise all of them at once. But I wouldn't have even known I'd had them if I hadn't had different jobs along the way that let me try out what I could be good at and what could work together. We've always called ourselves a funder. We've had a raft of consultants coming in over the last year as part of our strategic planning process. And one of them announced, you're not really a funder, you're a network weaver. And that's really what the world is made of now. I mean, whether it's social media or the social interactions, it's all about networks and weaving really a new fabric that is inclusive for our cities and town and our country. And so you might be in a major, or you might be thinking I'm in economics or political science or music or whatever your field of study is, but you'll find out that there's a lot of other things underneath that that are going to really bolster your experience in the working world.
Well, that was such a beautiful answer. I hesitate to follow it. But
I feel like everyone should answer this question.
Yeah. Similar to what you were sharing, I double majored in communication and classics. So if anyone wants to speak Latin, I'm your gal. But I knew that wasn't really going to be a career path for me. And when I was in college, I got involved with an organization called Pure Health Exchange. I see a couple nods, and so I taught STIs and HIV to ninth graders in Los Angeles. So that was something that I just joined on a whim, wanted to get involved and practice public speaking, and it really opened my eyes to the disparities in healthcare and education that were right down the street for me. So that is really what drew me to pursue healthcare. I also had a family connection to cancer. So I thought, okay, I'll get a job at Dana-Farber. Happens to be one of the top cancer institutions in the country, no big deal, in the fundraising office. And I did not think of myself as a fundraiser. It's very out of my comfort zone to be on this panel right now, so I saw myself on the back end. And what I was surprised was that there are so many more opportunities out there in fundraising or philanthropy than just asking people for money. So what I've done is leverage my love for doing something different every day and understanding the big picture to take on some more strategic roles and understanding what programs are we gonna run, how are we gonna influence our business plan, and how are we gonna fund all these new and amazing initiatives that are coming out of the Institute. So that's my also circuitous role.
I think I always knew that I wanted to do mission-driven work. It was very much a family value and something that was modeled for me. I had lots of ideas about what that would look like. I really wanted to travel to other countries. And I remember my mother saying, you need a skill before anybody wants to, you probably need to figure something out you can do first. So I guess that was an initial focus of mine, was to figure out what skills I could bring to that kind of work and what I would enjoy the most. I will say right out of college, my primary sort of challenge was maybe balancing that with just the need for a paycheck and basic stuff. I fell in love toward the end of my Wellesley career and actually got pregnant and had my daughter 6 months after I graduated, and so needed benefits and a steady paycheck. And ended up doing AmeriCorps service in part because it provided all of that, as well as there's a child care benefit that I learned about, and I was able to get my master's with tuition reimbursement. So there were lots of reasons why that was a great option. I think it's gotten a lot harder as the cost of living in this area has gone up. That was 15 years ago. And they still make the same amount of money they did as I did. And then, I think within that path, I really loved education. I loved working with young people. and realized over time, it was sort of like I'd see another job and be like, ooh, I really, and then I would start to sort of weasel my way in there to start doing more and more of it, and then they would bring me over into that team, and then I'd move into another team, and then I did fundraising for a while, and I think it's just figuring out like, nonprofit work and mission-driven work is so vast. You can be a CFO in a nonprofit and be doing mission-driven work. You can be doing so many like communications or fundraising, like there's just lots of different things to do, and I think I ultimately realized like I was pretty good at direct service and working with young people, but I was sort of better at other things, and kind of was able to, had some really great mentors along the way that helped me recognize that and helped me sort of find the path that led me to where I am now.
So taking us back to our fields themselves, I wonder if you can talk to the audience a bit about what you sort of see as the trends or the even the emerging disruptions within your work or your field, and how, in particular, how people sort of coming into your field, may look at their career path differently because of those changes.
I'll start. I assume the field would be nonprofits, or I could talk about government, which is a whole different field, but let's go with nonprofits for now. And I think this is probably one of the most exciting times to be thinking about the nonprofit sector. It is under dramatic change. I talked about the fragility of the field in terms of its financial fragility, and one of the things that we've just developed that's brand new at the Mass Cultural Council is a stress test. You know how they used to have stress tests, or maybe they still do for banks and financial institutions? Well, we are just rolling out a new stress test for our cultural nonprofits. The giving field has changed dramatically in the last 10 or 15 years. It used to be the case where you could count on corporate support because corporate CEOs would move into a town and they would want to raise their family there, so they needed a ballet and they needed a theater and they needed all the wonderful assets, and so they put money in and they expected to stay. But now corporate executives are moving all over the place. They're not going to stay any place for any length of time, and so they don't see that value proposition in terms of making investments in their cultural life of their communities. Additionally, corporations are constantly, if they do any charitable giving at all, are changing like virtually on an hourly basis on what their focus is, and it's a narrow focus. It isn't more encyclopedic giving to a little bit of everything. And unfortunately, the arts and culture is not rising to the top of the list in terms of where corporate philanthropy is. It's also true in terms of foundation giving. So the number one contributed source of income for our cultural nonprofits are individuals. And individual giving is a lot more labor intensive. It takes a lot more strategy. It takes a lot more dissecting of the marketplace and understanding why a person gives and what they're sort of buying with their philanthropic contribution to an organization. So the business model for cultural organizations is due for a major, major disruption. The hardest money to find is operating support, because nobody gets that warm, fuzzy feeling knowing they've contributed to your salary or to the utility bill or to sweeping the snow off the sidewalk. They want to give to something heartfelt, like the educational outreach program, or something they put a plaque on, like that new building that we can be naming after us. So this is a huge, huge challenge for our cultural organizations. What are the consequences? One, they go out of business. So we lose the small homegrown ones, even the large ones. Some of the most famous cultural nonprofits that you all know are on the precipice of making payroll at the end of this week. So that's one thing that happens. But here's another consequence. They're monetizing and selling the assets that they hold in the public trust. We have a museum in the Berkshires that last year sold its art collection, including the most valuable Norman Rockwell painting that the artist himself entrusted to that museum so it would stay in that community, were sold because they had a broken business model. So the challenge to all of us who are excited about the nonprofits is, how do we design a new system that could be a sustainable nonprofit sector? And that's just one piece.
So really quickly, I wanted to follow up and say there's an opportunity on the other side. So in my field and where we're at, where we're looking at the maker movement, I think we see a lot of opportunity to get potential funders and also partnerships. So a lot of my work is partnership development. And really we're looking at, what is the impact of the work that we do on the communities around us. So you may say, okay, that's great, there's a makerspace and some people get to make their robots or whatever they're doing in their makerspace. But what we say is that there are opportunities that come out of these spaces. So the creativity that you see in the space, the STEM skills that you see, the soft skills that you may develop in those different places transition into entrepreneurial opportunities. They may transfer into manufacturing opportunities. They may be ways that we can bolster American manufacturing. There may be ways that we can increase the economic value of a community. They may be ways that we reach our educational goals and that we have dynamic educational experiences for our youth so that they're not just learning science and engineering in a vacuum, but they are understanding that translates to the careers that they'll have in the future. And so by making those arguments and doing a really great job, and that's where we can use more people coming into nonprofits who are passionate about things like communication, about marketing, to really tell the stories of the impacts that we're having so that we then can move forward and have that convincing argument for people when they are coming into communities like, hey, you do still need that museum, you do still need that makerspace, you do still need those institutions that are important to the survival of your community, because your community is not only going to survive on the corporations, it's going to survive on all of these other things that may or may not seem initially appealing or make that connection for you. And so that's something that I think there is a great opportunity and a great disruption that's happening now, is that people really are looking for the social impact of their giving. And I think you're absolutely right that, it is hard to look at the payroll pieces of that, but I think when you're able to tie what it is that the impact of what your organization is doing, where you're able to say, okay, here, to communicate, and I think the work that you do is tremendous. We were having a conversation before this, in how you communicate that to the public is very, very important. So I think there's a really great opportunity, to come into this field and change it and get that word out there.
All right. I want to ask some questions related to really, what, as recruiters or hirers, what we are looking for in professionals. And so if you could, a few of you could talk about, maybe from this side this time, I'll pass over the mic. Sorry, you're sort of you're in a mic oasis here. What kinds of skills or characteristics or knowledge are you looking for when you are hiring in your field?
I think that, the best predictor of success in a role is really going to be past performance. And so a good recruiter is going to ask you lots of questions about things you have done. And you need to be able to clearly communicate, like, what was the context, what happened, what did you do, and what was the result, and do it in a kind of succinct answer. So that's kind of a tactical suggestion. I think I just want to get on the phone with people or meet people that can explain to me like what they've done in the past and let me figure out how that's going to translate to the context that I'm hiring for. I think I've probably hired and supervised like over 100 people over the last maybe 8 years, and I think that I always want sort of problem solvers. I want people that are really passionate about the work and they've done the homework. Like, do they understand what the job is? Do they ask lots of interesting questions? Do they really kind of get the role? And are they going to be like nothing in that? I feel like a job in a nonprofit 6 months later is probably going to look a little different than it was the day you were hired. And 6 months after that, it's probably changed again. And so you want someone that's really excited about the broad sense of what the organization is doing and kind of ready to adjust over the course of time. So I think that's one of the things I'm looking for. And I think then just real an ability to be self-reflective and talk about like when you've received feedback, and even, if you get feedback in the interview process, how do you respond to that? Because anybody in any of these roles is going to need to be able to learn as they go and be able to adjust as they go. And so I want to see somebody that understands that going in and is kind of ready to learn and wants to get better at what they're doing. because if you come in thinking you know everything, you're not going to necessarily be equipped to work with the people that you're trying to support or work on a team with, and then also you're going to be tough to manage. So.
To be transparent, I don't manage anybody. I've been involved in my fair share of interviews, and I think that things that I've noticed about successful candidates are just their willingness to do the work and learn. And it's a lot of times people, there might be someone who comes in who doesn't have experience in a prior internship or is looking to make a career change, and it's really their attitude and approach toward learning new things that makes a hiring manager take a second look at them. And I also think that, to your point as well, it's all about relationship management as well. Even if you're working by yourself coding, you're still gonna likely end up interacting with people. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give related to hiring is just making sure that every interaction you have with someone counts. And it really makes a difference. I've seen even just not having a thank you note it can be a deal breaker for some organizations. So just really being thoughtful about the communication that you have with every individual in the organization.
So we're a startup, right? And with being a startup means that we need people who are going to just roll up their sleeves and figure out what needs to get done. And we're a remote organization. So I have team members in California, in New York, in Chicago, in Cambridge, right? People, in fact, we have someone in Lima, Peru. So you need to be able to be flexible and to sort of figure out what's the best way that you can contribute your value and do it. And I think that's kind of part one. It's just this startup mentality, right? When we're all sort of nose to the grind constantly, we don't have the time to sort of do the same level of planning and deliberation, I think, that more established organizations have the luxury of doing. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should, but we don't always have that at the same time. The second piece for us is that when we're hired by organizations, if a government agency calls us or a nonprofit calls us, they're asking us to come and inject a new way of thinking and a new way of working into what they're doing. They're looking for creativity, right? If they could solve this within their organization, they would have done so, right? So they are asking us to bring something that is a departure from their normal, and it's going to shift their trajectory from what they were doing yesterday to what they should be doing tomorrow, what they could be doing tomorrow, right? And so with that in mind, creativity is key. I need people who we sit down to plan an interaction we're going to have with our client, and I was doing this today. I'll give you an example. So we are working with an organization that's running an executive leadership program. And as part of this executive leadership program, they do small group work, like groups of leaders working every afternoon. And when we start the course at the beginning of the week, each team is going to come. There are teams coming from all around the world. And we have to find a way for them to present their work, right? To learn about what projects the others are working on. And so the normal way of doing this is each team gets up and they give a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation and they sit down. And this year they said, we can't do that anymore. We have to think about something new. So I sat down today and I had to come up with all sorts of things, right? So I came up with Pictionary. Like, we could get people to draw the project that they're working on, and the team has to guess at what they're drawing, and then the team has to describe what was drawn, and then they get points for whether it was close or not close to reality, right? Or Project Bingo. If you hear the word stakeholder challenges, like, tick it off on your bingo card, right? I can go on and on. I came up with hundreds of these ideas because we have to be really prolific in our creativity to really offer some robust solutions to the people we work with. So I'm looking for people who are going to jump into that process with me and say, whoa, not bingo, not Pictionary. We could do outside ninja pole vaulting because they have to aim for their impact goal, or who knows what, right? But the point is they have to be able to think of things that I can't think of and that our partners aren't thinking of, and so we really look for that. And the last piece is I look for people who are incredibly self-aware, and who are self-aware about not only who they are in their own identity, but they understand their place in the broader context and in society. Right? They understand the privilege they came from or didn't come from. They understand what their role might be around issues of equity today, regardless of where they came from, and they understand what role they'd like to have in the future. And I often am sort of presented with folks who are on paper fantastic, but when you start to say, where do you fit in the broader picture? What are you trying to accomplish? They don't have that broader context of the world in which they live. And those kinds of people can't be effective at having really genuine, authentic conversations with our partners and the communities we serve because they can't connect on an authentic level. So I really look for that level of self-awareness.
So we have time. I'm going to ask you all one more question, and then I know we have the networking event, and so folks learning what you've learned today can feel free to ask individual questions of our speakers and other folks who are here in the room. But just it seems a good question to end on is, what advice might you have given your younger self before none of my questions are easy. Sorry, they're always like soul searching. Sorry.
Good for us, though.
Yeah, exactly. So, in thinking about that in ways that might benefit the students in this room, and also, or alternatively, what about the work that you do now surprises you? Would you not have anticipated when you first started working in the field or in your organization? Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think advice. I know. I think. I think just to follow up on your last comment, I feel like I wish I did more work sooner around just identifying my own biases and how my identity and sort of privilege would show up in all of my interactions in every sort of space I was in, especially in kind of mission-driven, kind of equity-focused work. I wish I had done that sooner. I had great folks along the way who pointed stuff out to me, and I kind of learned some of that the hard way, I think. But I guess I just wish I had done it sooner, which certainly started here at Wellesley, but I could have done more. And then, what was the second part of the question?
What surprised you about the work?
Oh, surprises me now. I mean, I guess what I would say is, so I worked for 11 years in one nonprofit, and I think that was really wonderful to just be so stable and have that kind of ability to build relationships and a network all from kind of one place, and really learned so much about just how nonprofits work and how systems work and develop as a person. And in the last 8 months, I've now been, my consulting firm works with nonprofits in the greater Boston area, so I've worked with like 7 different nonprofits. And it, when I was at Citizen Schools, you kind of have both the good and the bad all swirling around in your brain, and you think it's really unique to your organization and your context. And now I've been working with executive teams, recruitment, all sorts of stuff, and it's like the same everywhere. So everybody has the same issues, the same challenges, the same staff sort of feedback, the same leadership problems. Like everything is just so similar with, different flavors and context based on the work. And so I think bringing some perspective into any role that you take within any organization, to be able to say like no organization and no job is going to be perfect, and being really clear about like why you're doing it, and to try to keep that why above the the day-to-day maybe stuff that goes on, that you wish the CEO was more whatever, and you wish that the pay was higher, whatever it is, whatever kind of your frustrations are. It's so the people that you work with day to day and the purpose of your work, I think, is what ultimately keeps you going and motivated in this kind of work. And the kind of daily stuff is not going to be that different if you just switch and go somewhere else.
So what I wish I had known. So it's time for a confession. So my confession, and I only just realized this very recently, I've never had a mentor. All right, now I'm just going to let that sink in. Hopefully for all of you, that's like, what? But somehow I went through all of my career to date and never had a mentor, and never realized that it wasn't normal or it wasn't good to not have a mentor. And I woke up a couple months ago and said, it's really lonely to be the founder of a business. I have so many questions, and I feel the reason I founded this business was to have more impact than I was having in the work I was doing before, right? Every day I wake up and say, could I be doing something with more impact? And until the day when the answer is, yes, I could be, I'm going to stay at the studio. The day when that answer is no longer yes, right, then no longer no, right? The day when someone approaches me and says, come run this organization, or come partner with me, let's start a new organization, I'll leave, because I want to be doing what I have the most impact. But I don't have anyone to help me think through the questions of what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, where I could be having the greatest impact. I'm really alone in my thinking about that. And I'm like, truthfully, kind of ashamed to say this. And I just thought mentors were for other people. Like, and if you didn't have a mentor, like there's a reason I don't have a mentor. Like, I don't know, maybe I don't have enough to offer someone who's older or more experienced in the field, or frankly, someone who's younger and could mentor me too, right? It goes both ways. We have a lot to learn from everyone. And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe what would the value exchange be? And I was so focused on this notion of there had to be this very concrete value exchange, that I never stopped to say, I could build a beautiful relationship with someone. We could support each other mutually. And from a career standpoint, it would take me to much higher heights than I've ever been. So for me, I just wish I had, earlier on, had that realization that a mentor could be for anyone, and had sought it out. So my 2019 goal is to find a mentor. I don't actually know how you do that, but I'm working on it. And I just wish I had known that.
I think I'm still relatively early in my career, but definitely when I was coming out of college and in the first couple of years, I wish I had been a little more patient. I think I was seeing all my friends getting their job offers and moving on with their lives, and I was really nervous and wanted to kind of find a job, not worrying about if it was the right job. I luckily happened to find one at an organization that I'm really happy to work at and proud to be a part of, but I know that it can be a really nerve-wracking time, and I think that giving yourself the permission to do things that you don't like to do, because that teaches you probably just as much about what you do want to do. So giving yourself the freedom to not love your job right away, and also the kind of understanding that it takes time to figure out what you want and where you want to go, and it's not just going to happen right off the bat.
So I think for me, the lesson that I learned is also the advice I want to give, which is your passion is something that you deserve to have. So I think, in saying that, it seems really weird because it seems super obvious to me now, but when I was sitting in your seat, I was so focused on what my parents wanted and so focused on what I thought Wellesley expected of me. I was so focused on, the honest truth was my situation. So I grew up really poor. I came to Wellesley from housing projects, so it was a very different place for me. And I didn't feel like I had the right or the privilege to be able to choose the job that I wanted. It was like, I need to make money. I need to do something that's going to make sure that I'm stable. They're real issues. And I think we can't negate those issues, right? Those are real issues. But I think I didn't give myself permission to take the wandering path because I was like, I'm not one of the women that can do that. That's not for me. But the thing is, the wandering path catches up with you, right, in life. And life kept throwing me opportunities to follow my passion. No, I got to stay straight and narrow. You don't understand. I can't deviate. Got to stay with the path. And I think I get emotional because I think the thing that I say to groups of women and men and everyone I mentor is please, please, please listen to that voice inside of you that's telling you what to do. I'm not trying to push beliefs on anybody, but I think there is sort of this karmic reality that things do kind of work out. That people, I do truly believe that people will help you achieve your passion, that the world is trying to conspire to make sure you do the thing that you are uniquely capable of doing, and that it will keep driving you there whether you like it or not until you get there and do the thing that you're supposed to do. Now, maybe that's crazy to some of you, and you're like, yeah, lady, you're really crazy, but I'm telling you, I fought that for a long time. I still was doing things for other people that I enjoyed. Like I said, I don't want anyone to think I don't like neuroscience. Love neuroscience. Got a degree in it, got an advanced degree in it, did a lot of really amazing work. That was very, very meaningful, but my passion kept coming after me and coming after me and coming after me. So think about what you cannot live without doing, the thing that you will do no matter if anyone pays you at all. And then try. Tell everybody about it so they can help you, so the world can conspire to make you do the thing that you want to do. Follow your passion. You have a right. Every single person, no matter what your circumstance, has a right to follow your passion. So I beg of you, please, 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 to follow your passion, because that's the thing that I really wish I had done earlier. I am super, super happy in my job right now, and I just wish I had gotten to that place even earlier. And I'm just so grateful I'm here today.
Just as a counterpoint, I didn't know what my passion was. So if you don't know your passion, don't worry about it. Don't go try to find a passion real quick. It'll come. You'll get one. Actually, this was such a good question because it made me sit back and think. So I know I don't look nearly as old as I really am, but I feel like I am like an early generation of you. Because when I entered in the workforce out of college, there weren't a lot of opportunities for women. We were sort of typecast into a few jobs. And so here's my point. Know your power because you have your power. So when I entered the workplace, there were a lot of things that women, you don't do this, you don't speak now, you don't have this kind of job, you don't have this kind of authority, you can't change things, you can't make this happen. And I look back on my career and it's like, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. And I work, you heard me, in government. Oh, God. Like, how many are aspiring to work in government? No hands go up in the room. But I want you to know, you need to think about it. Because working in government gives you such an extraordinary opportunity to make enormous change and have huge impact. And you have the power to do that. When we were talking about what a hiring manager wants, think about what you want. Ask the questions. What's the world you want to live in and the workplace you want to work in? You're interested in social justice? Ask the employer about their diversity, equity, inclusion. Ask them about how they handle issues of sexual assault. Ask them about the very things that are confronting us in our world every day, because they're happening in our workplaces. And the only way that's going to change is if people come into the workplace and make that change from within. Or even if you don't get in, every time you knock on the door of the workplace, you bring it up every single time. Whether you find yourself in a nonprofit, whether you find yourself as an entrepreneur, as a teaching artist, you have a power at a time in our society when drastic change is on the horizon. We're right at the precipice of it. And you are about ready to enter the workforce to be able to implement that change. So I would only say one thing to you: know your power and use it.
That was so wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your willingness to share what you do, why you do it, how it's changing, and to also try to inspire our students. I can speak for Wellesley to say we always appreciate it when people are willing to come and speak to our students in that way. So Destiny, do you want to, yeah.
I'm Destiny Barletta, and I'm the Career Community Advisor for Arts, Media, and Communications, and I'm going to help us transition to a sort of networking portion of the event, which is going to be like speed networking format. So I will give a minute for each of the panelists to return to their tables, and then we can proceed with the first sort of stop in the speed networking. So everyone stay where you are, and panelists will come back to their tables, and then we can start.